There are all sorts of facts that we learn from books, some from the internet as well as our teachers, but the thing is we tend to believe them without verifying the facts. Some of these are lies that have been passed down, while the others are downright wrong, and the truth is unbelievable. Alright then, let's get started on some of the facts that sound so out of this world, yet they are true. The spaghetti singular. Imagine you had a special bowl of spaghetti. You twirl your fork, then pick up a single spaghetti. Turns out that spaghetti is the proper noun for all that pasta. But how about we do a crash course in Italian? I usually indicates that it's plural, while O and A indicate that it's singular. This means that a single strand of spaghetti is called spaghetto. This is just the beginning. Gnocco is the singular for gnocchi, while fettuccino is the singular for fettuccine, and raviolo is the singular for ravioli. This leaves us with a vital single question. What then is a spaghetti-o? Dubious Columbus Day. Each year, Americans all over the country celebrate Columbus Day to celebrate the Italian explorer Christopher Columbus, who landed in America and discovered America, as well as Europe in 1492. There is only one problem. Christopher Columbus did not discover America at all. In his initial route, he was set out to head to China, India, and the other parts of Asia. In 1492, he landed in the Bahamas and thought it was the Americas. Or rather, it was not the America that most people related to. Later that year, he went to Cuba. He thought that was mainland China. Later, his expedition led him to Haiti and the Dominican Republic, which he thought was Japan. Between his back and forth between Europe, South and Central America, he however never set a foot in what is now the United States. That is a huge hole from my history classes growing up. Independence Derb. Columbus Day is not the only national holiday that the Americans have gotten wrong where history is concerned. They celebrate July 4th as the official day that the nation got independence from the rule of the British. This day is not by a day or a week, but by a whole month. The Declaration of Independence is a document that outlines the separation of 13 North American British colonies from Britain's rule. The declaration was approved by the British on July 2nd and was ratified by Congress on July 4th, but it was not made legal because of 7 Congress members who were absent. So it took almost a month until all 56 members of the Continental Congress signed it on August 2nd. Looks like the Americans were just keen to celebrate their independence and freedom. Maybe I should take August 2nd as my private holiday. The Great Walls of China. Schools teach that the Great Wall of China is the only structure that can be seen from space. This is a little skewed though. There's some confusion here. 1. Which is the Great Wall? The main span of the Great Wall, which was built to stop nomadic communities from invading China from the north, stretches almost 5,500 miles or 8,850 kilometers across the country. But hey, it's not the only wall. Different walls were constructed all over from 5 BC to 17 AD, and depending on where China was being attacked in that area. If these walls were lined up end to end, the wall would be 13,170 miles or 21,195 kilometers long. That would still not make the wall wider. So how again would it be seen from space? Here's a picture of the Great Wall from a low orbit somewhere in space. I can't see it. Can you? NASA was kind enough to point out the exact sections. From the looks of things, the wall in space is not the massive iconic feature that I clearly see. Feels like my teacher exaggerated a little. Hilarious human priorities. Truth be told, we all know that it's a great achievement for a man to reach space, especially back in the day with Apollo 1 when Neil Armstrong stepped into space for the first time in 1969. But while these milestones happening, people on Earth are still carrying their bags using handles, and it wasn't until 3 years later in 1972 that someone thought to put wheels on luggage suitcases. The first ever patent was filed. Good to see humanity finally set their priorities in order. Unbelievable as it may be, there's a good reason why this was the case. The space race of the 1960s forced a lot of innovation in the space industry. Air travel, though, was not as common back then. So I find it quite bizarre that man went on the moon before thinking to put tiny wheels on suitcases. Clouds weigh a ton. That, my friend, is a little-known fact. They look light as paper and they float in the sky, but really they're not as light as they seem. Clouds are tiny water vapor that condenses into tiny water particles. It's like dust or sea salt that are settled in the air. It takes the shape of such droplets but is still light enough to defy gravity and stay in the air. Researchers calculate that the cumulus cloud, the big fluffy ones we see daily, are 1 kilometre across. They're as tall as they are wide, and that means they have a volume of 1 billion cubic metres. This means they have 0.5 grams of water droplets per cubic metre of clouds. Doesn't sound like a lot, but really what this means is that these clouds are a staggering 500,000 kilograms. For perspective, that's about 100 African elephants. Body odour oddness. If you've been in a hot, stuffy space like a smelly subway train, people's armpits can be sweaty and nasty. This is because skin-dwelling bacteria thrive in warm, moist areas like sweaty underarms. The bacteria produce a sweat-specific protein that's produced by a gene called APCC11. This protein is broken down into tiny products that are called thioalcohol by the bacteria, and that causes the bad body odour smell. Enough people over time have found solutions for this, well, except those living in North Korea who don't have to. This is because 99% of the Korean population has a non-functional ABCC11 gene. They don't produce that gene, and by default don't sweat like the rest of the world does. That could be rather handy. You could save a ton of cash on deodorants, and also finding a girlfriend wouldn't have been so hard. The real forbidden fruit. One of the most renowned accounts in the Bible revolves around the 5 characters God, Adam, Eve, the serpent, and the apple. So the story in the Bible goes that Adam was warned to enjoy all the fruits and goodies in the Garden of Eden except the forbidden fruit. Then the snake or serpent convinced Adam to eat the forbidden fruit. Let's focus on the fruit for a minute. The fruit that Eve and Adam ate was an apple, right? Well, actually, nowhere is it mentioned what specific fruit it was. According to the Hebrew translations, it would have been anything, really. A peach, a pear, a mango, something completely different, you name it. Taking the pith. So we now know that watermelons are green on the outside and red on the inside, but do you know that it was not always that way? Around 1645, Italian artist Giovanni Stacchi created this painting with an assortment of fruits. This fruit right here looks like an unripe melon, yet according to the brief, this melon was perfectly ripe at the time because of the black seeds. For many years, people have planted watermelons and have strived for them to be sweeter and have more of that red flesh and less of that bitter, seedy pith. So the watermelons you enjoy today have been engineered to look and taste the way they do. The engineering does not stop there. Juicy peaches that we enjoy also started as very small cherry-like fruits with little flesh. They were first cultivated in 400 BC by the Chinese and tasted more like lentils and less like fruits. But fast forward to today, and after years of crossbreeding, peaches are 64% larger, 27% juicier and 4% sweeter. I don't know about you, but I think that makes them 100% better. The Earth isn't round. There's so much proof out there that the world is round thanks to photography, physics, satellites and all of that. But it's not actually a perfect sphere. The Earth isn't perfectly solid, so as it spins in space, the centrifugal force drags it out to the equator, while the pole remains unaffected. This results in the Earth being ever so slightly bulgy at the equator and looking slightly squashed. The effect is so small it's 0.3 times wider at the equator than it is at the 2 poles. It sounds pretty small. This is a 26-mile bulge, more than 94 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of each other. Maybe with that in mind, us Earthlings can get a clearer perspective. Cleopatra wasn't Egyptian. Cleopatra is hands down one of the most iconic Egyptian rulers of all time. She's been portrayed in all forms of art as a true beauty. She's the ultimate queen of Egypt. She's, however, not Egyptian, and was the last of the Greek Macedonian dynasty Ptolemaic clan that ruled Egypt from the time of Alexander the Great's time from 323 BC. Not being ethnically Egyptian was the least of her worries. Like most of the royal families, the Ptolemaic line mostly married among each other's families. It's believed that Cleopatra's parents could have been brother and sister. If a non-Egyptian woman who's the product of incest can become an iconic queen, anything is possible. Bubble wrap rooms. There's nothing as satisfying as popping bubble wrap. It's fun to pop, but it wasn't designed to be packaging material. Back in 1957, Alfred Field and Mark Shiven were trying to create some type of textured wallpaper that was all the rage at the time. They first put 2 pieces of shower curtains through a heat sealing machine. They were left disappointed by the final flimsy sheet dotted with trapped air bubbles. No one would want to have this on their walls. They started thinking of other uses. They tried it out as a greenhouse installation. That didn't make much sense. They finally discovered bubble wrap's true calling in the protective packaging industry. These days, around 240,000 miles or 386,243 kilometers of bubble wrap is used each year. That's enough to loop around the Earth 10 times. This idea was destined to become the world's ugliest wallpaper. Glad they decided otherwise. Snail chops. Anyone who looks at a garden snail can point out its features like its shell and eyes. But where exactly is its mouth? Is it here or there? It's here, located on the underside, and it's made up of a tiny jaw and a flexible band underneath that contains 14,000 microscopic teeth called a radula. The jaw cuts off larger pieces of food like leaves which are scraped down by the radula, which acts like a tiny cheese grater. Not all snails are the same. We have mystery snails, which are aquatic gastropods whose radula moves in and out of their mouths as they scavenge. This allows them to feed on the organic matter while at the same time helping the mouth remain suctioned to the surface they're attached to. Here I thought those cheese grater teeth were horrifying enough when not moving. In motion, it's downright scary. Mice can grow human body parts. When organ transplants became majorly successful in the 1980s, demand for them skyrocketed and there was a crisis among the medical community. The demand was more than the supply, and that led to a serious shortage. In 1997, surgeons and researchers began experimenting with whether or not human body parts could be grown. Not in a lab, but on animals. This experiment was a success, as proven by the vacanti mouse, a rodent with an ear growing on its back. Surgeons achieved this by growing an ear scaffold which they attached under the mouse's skin. They then injected cartilage cells which grew around the scaffold in the shape of an ear. Amazingly, the cells thrived, resulting in a human ear. This proved the possibility of extensive tissue regeneration of human subjects as possible. Doctors were then able to go with cartilage features in humans, like this ear growing on a veteran soldier's forearm. He lost it during the war. Once fully grown in a part of the body that receives good blood flow, the ear can then be transferred and transplanted on the side of the head without much risk. This amazing breakthrough was thanks to a little-known mouse. Wow. This isn't a sonic boom. If you've been lucky enough to witness an aircraft going supersonic, you'll know that the only other impressive thing other than the sound is the sight. That brilliant cloud burst appears when the jet breaks the sound barrier and is led to believe it's a sonic boom. It's not. These clouds are called vapor cones, a physical effect that takes place when something approaches the speed of sound. It's not the sonic boom itself. As the aircraft approaches the speed of sound, which is approximately 767 miles per hour, shockwaves form around the clouds, and this causes a discontinuity in the local temperature and pressure, forcing the air to lose its power to hold water, and in condensation mode forms the vapor cones. Vapor cones appear mostly in the state of transonic flight. This is why some of the sonic booms like this one don't have iconic vapor cones. But here, even without the vapor cone, that's seriously impressive. That was just about enough time that we had for education and re-education. Which of these facts blew your mind? And if you had it your way, you'd sue some of your teachers, right? Let us know in the comments section. Adios.